In previous videos, we've explored stories about cybercriminals, internet mysteries, and the individuals who changed the world from the shadows. But today's story doesn't begin with a computer. It doesn't begin with a hacker. And it doesn't begin with a crime. It begins with a young girl standing beside a nuclear missile. A child whose existence the world didn't even know about until just a few years ago. And now, many believe she could one day succeed one of the most powerful leaders on the planet. This is the story of Kim Ju-ae, and the reason why she may be the most dangerous child in the world. For years, Kim Ju-ae wasn't supposed to exist. At least, not publicly. The Kim family has always treated private life as a state secret. Birthdays are hidden. Relationships are hidden. Children are hidden. The fewer people know, the easier it is to control the story. That is why one of the first clues about Kim Jong-un's daughter came from such an unlikely source: an American basketball player. In 2013, former NBA star Dennis Rodman traveled to North Korea. The trip made headlines around the world. Nobody expected the retired athlete to become friends with one of the world's most isolated leaders. Yet somehow, that's exactly what happened. Rodman spent time with Kim Jong-un. They watched basketball, talked for hours, went boating. And according to Rodman, he even spent time with Kim's family. Then, during an interview after returning home, he revealed something unexpected. Kim Jong-un had a daughter. Not only that, Rodman claimed he had actually held the child in his arms. He even mentioned her alleged name, Kim Ju-ae. At the time, the revelation sounded almost unbelievable. North Korea never confirmed it. State media remained silent. No photographs were released. No public appearances followed. For most people, the story faded away. But intelligence agencies didn't forget. Over the next several years, South Korean intelligence reports continued collecting fragments of information. According to those reports, Kim Jong-un had multiple children, possibly a son, possibly a daughter, possibly another child whose identity remains unknown. But there was one problem. Nobody outside the regime could verify any of it. The children remained invisible. And in North Korea, invisibility is often intentional. The less the world knows, the more valuable the mystery becomes. Then, nearly a decade after Dennis Rodman first mentioned the girl, something extraordinary happened. North Korean state media suddenly released images from a missile test. The missile itself was enormous, one of the most powerful weapons in the country's arsenal. But nobody was looking at the missile, because standing beside Kim Jong-un was a young girl, holding his hand, smiling at the cameras. For the first time, the world was looking at the child who had spent years hidden in the shadows. And from that moment on, everything changed. If Kim Ju-ae was being prepared for something important, her childhood looked very different from that of ordinary North Koreans. Most children in North Korea grow up in one of the most isolated countries on Earth. Their lives are shaped by state-controlled education, limited access to information, and an economy that has struggled for decades. Kim Ju-ae, however, appears to have grown up inside an entirely different world. A world hidden behind gates, guards, and luxury compounds. Satellite images and intelligence reports suggest that the Kim family owns multiple private residences across the country. Massive estates surrounded by forests, private beaches, luxury guest houses, even personal railway stations. Some of these compounds are so large that they resemble small towns rather than family homes. One estate on North Korea's eastern coast is believed to be among the family's favorites. The property reportedly includes yachts, riding tracks, sports facilities, and direct access to the sea. It was also one of the places Dennis Rodman visited during his trips to North Korea. According to intelligence assessments, Kim Ju-ae is believed to enjoy horseback riding and skiing. Both hobbies are closely associated with the Kim family. In North Korean propaganda, horses carry a special symbolic meaning. White horses in particular are often linked to the mythology of the Kim dynasty itself. But the most interesting detail isn't how she lived. It's where she wasn't seen. Unlike her father and aunt, who spent part of their youth studying abroad, Kim Ju-ae appears to have remained inside North Korea. Experts believe this may have been intentional. Sending her overseas would expose her to outside influences. Keeping her inside the country allows the regime to control every aspect of her education, environment, and public image. Which raises another question. If Kim Joo-ae was simply a private daughter, why invest so much effort in controlling her image for nearly a decade? And why reveal her now? Because when North Korea finally brought her into public view, it wasn't at a school. It wasn't at a family celebration. It was beside one of the most powerful missiles in the country's arsenal. In November 2022, North Korea conducted one of its most important missile tests in years. The regime wanted the world to pay attention. State media released dramatic footage. Military officials stood by. Cameras captured every angle. And at the center of it all stood Kim Jong-un. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him was a young girl, Kim Joo-ae. It was her first confirmed public appearance, and the setting could not have been more unusual. Most world leaders introduce their children through family photographs, holiday celebrations, graduation ceremonies. Kim Jong-un introduced his daughter beside an intercontinental ballistic missile, a weapon capable of traveling thousands of kilometers. A weapon designed to project power far beyond North Korea's borders. The image immediately spread around the world. Father and daughter holding hands in front of one of the most destructive machines ever built. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A child standing beside a weapon of mass destruction. But what made the moment truly remarkable was what happened afterward. Kim Joo-ae didn't disappear. She kept returning, again and again and again. She appeared at military inspections, missile launches, defense exhibitions, army celebrations, events normally reserved for senior military officials. With every appearance, her position seemed to change. At first, she stood near her father. Then she stood beside him. Soon, she appeared to be sharing the spotlight. Analysts began studying every photograph, every gesture, every seating arrangement, every detail. Because in North Korea, public appearances are carefully choreographed. Nothing is accidental. Every image serves a purpose. And the more experts examined the footage, the more one question kept returning. Why was a young girl being introduced through military events instead of civilian ones? Because if Kim Joo-ae was simply the dictator's daughter, there were countless ways to present her to the public. North Korea chose missiles. And that choice may have revealed far more than the regime intended. As Kim Joo-ae's appearances became more frequent, analysts started noticing something unusual. It wasn't just that she was present. It was where she was standing, who stood around her, and how state media chose to present her. In North Korea, power is often communicated through symbols rather than announcements. The regime rarely tells people what it's doing. Instead, it shows them a position in a photograph, a title in a newspaper, a seat at a banquet. These details may seem insignificant, but inside authoritarian systems, they can carry enormous meaning. One photograph in particular attracted international attention. It showed Kim Joo-ae standing in front of her father during the launch of North Korea's first military spy satellite. For decades, Kim family propaganda had followed a simple rule: the leader is always the center of attention. The leader is always the focal point. Yet in this image, many observers felt that Kim Jong-un had been pushed into the background. The cameras seemed drawn toward his daughter, and it wasn't an isolated incident. As months passed, Kim Joo-ae appeared increasingly close to the center of power. State media began using more respectful language when referring to her. Military officials appeared around her. Senior generals smiled beside her. And at times, she seemed to receive attention, usually reserved for political figures. The question was obvious. Was North Korea introducing a future successor? Or was the world seeing something else entirely? Some experts argue that Kim Jong-un may simply be strengthening his own image. A dictator shown not only as a military commander, but also as a caring father. Others believe the symbolism goes much deeper. That North Korea is slowly preparing its population to recognize a future leader long before any official announcement is made. The truth is that nobody outside the regime knows for certain, but one fact remains difficult to ignore. Dictators rarely spend years building a public image for someone who isn't meant to matter. So what do you think? Is Kim Joo-ae being prepared to inherit power one day? Or is she simply part of a carefully crafted propaganda campaign designed to strengthen her father's rule? If Kim Joo-ae is being prepared for power, there is one question that matters more than any other. Why now? Why introduce her in 2022? Why not 5 years earlier? Or 10 years later? To understand that, we need to look at the man standing beside her, Kim Jong-un. For much of his rule, succession was not a major topic of discussion. He was relatively young, firmly in control. And unlike his father during his final years, he showed no obvious signs that power would need to change hands anytime soon. But over the last several years, that perception has started to shift. Reports from intelligence agencies and foreign media have repeatedly raised concerns about his health. Heavy smoking, weight gain, possible cardiovascular problems, a family history of serious medical issues. None of these reports can be independently verified. North Korea treats information about the leader's health as a state secret, but even rumors matter. Because in a system built around a single individual, uncertainty can be dangerous. If Kim Jong-un were suddenly unable to rule, who would replace him? That question isn't just important for North Korea. It's important for China, Russia, South Korea, Japan, and the United States. Because whoever controls North Korea also controls one of the world's largest militaries and a growing nuclear arsenal. The stakes are enormous. History offers another clue. When Kim Jong-il died in 2011, the transition of power was risky. Kim Jong-un was still young, relatively unknown, and many analysts questioned whether he could maintain control. He eventually did, but only after years of consolidating power and removing potential rivals. That experience may have taught him a lesson. A successor should never be introduced at the last moment. The public needs time to recognize them. The elite needs time to accept them. And the system needs time to adjust. From that perspective, Kim Joo-ae's public appearances begin to make more sense. This may not be about today. It may be about 10 years from now, or 20. A long-term investment in the future of the dynasty. And that future matters more than ever. Because despite all its military power, North Korea faces serious challenges: economic pressure, international sanctions, population decline, food shortages, growing dependence on China. The regime may appear stable from the outside, but every authoritarian system worries about what happens after the current leader is gone. That is why succession matters. Not when everything is working, but when something suddenly goes wrong. And perhaps that's the most revealing thing about Kim Joo-ae's rise. North Korea isn't acting like a regime that wants the world to ignore her. It's acting like a regime that wants people to remember her face. Because one day, remembering that face may become very important. And that leads to another possibility. Maybe Kim Joo-ae isn't being prepared because a transition is imminent. Maybe she's being prepared because North Korea knows that every dynasty survives only if people believe there will be another generation to follow. The question is whether that next generation is really Kim Joo-ae, or whether the world is seeing exactly what the regime wants it to see. For decades, the idea of a female ruler in North Korea seemed almost impossible. The country is deeply patriarchal. Its military is dominated by men. Its political leadership has been dominated by men. And every supreme leader in the country's history has been male. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. 3 generations. 3 men, 1 dynasty. That is why Kim Joo-ae's rise has attracted so much attention. Because if she really is being prepared for power, she wouldn't just become the next leader of North Korea. She would become the first woman ever to rule it. At first glance, that sounds unlikely, but North Korea has already shown signs of change. One person in particular demonstrates that: Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's younger sister. Over the past decade, she has become one of the most influential figures in the country. She regularly appears beside her brother during diplomatic meetings. She issues statements on foreign policy. She represents the regime on the international stage. And many analysts believe she is among the most powerful people in North Korea. If a woman can rise that high within the system, perhaps the idea of a female leader is no longer impossible. But Kim Yo-jong has one major disadvantage. She is Kim Jong-un's sister, not his child. And in North Korea, bloodline matters. Perhaps more than anything else. The Kim dynasty is built around the idea of direct inheritance. Power passes from parent to child, generation after generation. The legitimacy of the regime depends on that continuity. From that perspective, Kim Joo-ae has something no one else possesses. She is part of the next generation, the direct descendant of the current ruler. the future of the bloodline itself, and that may be more important than gender. In fact, some experts argue that North Korea's ruling family has reached a point where blood has become stronger than tradition, stronger than custom, perhaps even stronger than the country's deeply rooted expectations about leadership, because dynasties survive through succession, and succession requires heirs. That doesn't mean Kim Ju-ae will become leader. Far from it. The truth is that nobody outside the regime knows what is happening behind closed doors. There may be other children, other candidates, other plans. Everything we know comes from fragments, photographs, state media broadcasts, intelligence reports, carefully controlled public appearances. And yet those fragments tell a fascinating story. A child who spent nearly a decade hidden from the world. A daughter introduced not through family portraits, but through missile launches. A young girl repeatedly placed beside generals, weapons, and symbols of state power. None of that proves she is the successor, but it suggests that the possibility is being carefully planted, slowly, deliberately, one image at a time. Maybe Kim Ju-ae is simply a beloved daughter. Maybe she is part of a propaganda campaign designed to humanize her father. Maybe Kim Jong-un wants the world to see him as more than a dictator, as a parent, a protector, a family man. Or maybe something much larger is happening. Maybe the world is witnessing the earliest stage of North Korea's next succession plan, a plan that could take years, perhaps decades, to fully unfold. And if that's true, then these photographs are more than family moments. They're political messages, signals aimed at the future, because one day, Kim Jong-un will no longer rule North Korea. The only question is, who comes after him? Today, Kim Ju-ae is still a child, a mysterious figure surrounded by speculation. But every year, she becomes a little more visible, a little more recognizable, and a little closer to the center of power. Perhaps that's exactly what North Korea wants. Because if she does eventually inherit the regime, the transition won't begin on the day she takes power. It will have begun years earlier, with a little girl standing beside her father, in front of a missile, while the world watched and wondered what it was really looking at.